Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome along to this part of our winter series of lectures. Just before I start and introduce the speaker, I just had word that our book on the built heritage of Stornoway will be going to the printers in Poland this week. Some members of our committee, Cathy Mackay and Jessie Murray, put together by Ian McCloud. I think it's put together or something.
Well, I think it was
orchestrated.
cobbled together.
Yeah. I've also had signals from the back. The yeoman of signals himself saying one or two people have forgotten about money in the tin. I don't want to hold you back. You've seen there's been pictures up of some wonderful pictures. That one in particular was taken by Chris Murray, and it's all about a dig. You might have seen a member of our committee amongst the dig team. There's £2 available for anybody who can guess who it was. No, there's no takers. Ken Galloway. I'm now going to introduce you to Ian Mchardy, who was an archaeologist and led the team on the dig at Sober Island. I'm sure you all know what it is. It's in the castle grounds, and I think you would have worked that out from the pictures. Ian, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you all for coming. I consider it a great honour to be invited to speak at the Stornoway Historical Society and talk to you this evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
It's my fault. Yes. Just again. Just again.
Hello?
She can hear you anyway.
Oh. Hello. Yeah, it's a great honour to be invited tonight to talk to you about our work. So I'm going to talk to you about an archaeological excavation we carried out last summer in a place which will be well known to many of you, perhaps, although I mean no disrespect. That is, of course, Sober Island, or more properly, Aird a Clerich, just south of Curry Point in the Lewes Castle grounds. Here we go. The reason why it has two names and the genesis of these names is an interesting discussion in itself. Most famously, though, as you probably all know, it was a venue for underage drinking, the name being ironic. However, many people think that the name is a lot older than that. A bit later on, I would like to ask you all to help me with this discussion involving some audience participation. But first, I would like to explain why we thought it was a good place to carry out a community excavation. So the site has been many different things to different folk over the years, so much so that when I first suggested the idea of an archaeological excavation at Sober Island, I was openly laughed at, and I lost count of the amount of times I was told that all I will find were ring pools. How wrong they were. In actual fact, we had a number of sound reasons for choosing the site, even if most of these reasons turned out to be wrong. But it is to these reasons we shall turn first by way of an introduction, and because the thought process involved in this provides a good context for what we did end up finding. So the genesis of the project, of course, came from the Stornoway Trust itself. In partnership with the Crawley and Island Shire, the Trust is currently undertaking a multi-million-pound regeneration project of the Lewes Castle grounds, following an award with the National Lottery. As part of their vision for the future of the grounds, they have employed a community engagement officer, Mr. Austin Traynor, whose role is to implement the map of engagement as outlined in the approved purposes of the grant. So the purposes include increasing the range of audiences utilising the core area, enhancing the heritage value, and increasing the range of volunteers and improving skills via training opportunities. So an archaeological project within the Trust boundaries was identified as one suitable way to achieve these purposes. So the Trust approached Ken Galloway of the Stornoway Historical Society, Kevin Murphy, the council archaeologist, and myself, and asked if we had any ideas. Various different projects were suggested. Ken's idea was an investigation of the cleared village of Ranel at the top of the golf course, which is an interesting idea and would be worth pursuing. However, the investigation would be constrained by the golf course itself, meaning that it would mostly take the form of survey, so not excavation, and this wouldn't have provided enough activity for our volunteers. So in the end, the argument for an archaeological excavation of Sober Island won out, and this for a number of reasons which I will now like to outline. So, as you will know as well, Sober Island is not actually an island proper, but what is termed a tide island, connected to the shore by a shingle spit or tombolo. It lies on the south side of the inner harbour, only circa 200 metres away across the channel from the medieval site of MacLeod's, which was originally McNichol's Castle, now under Pier 1. So the castle is marked Old Castle in this first edition map. So 1849, I think this map is. So you can see it's not far away. Oh, you can't see my cursor, never mind. It's the two red arrows. So Sober Island at the bottom, it's not far away, it's just across, 200 metres across the water. So I'm no military historian, and I would invite discussion if anyone in the audience thinks this logic is wrong, but I would have thought that this location would be of high strategic importance to anyone attacking or defending the harbour. Again, this is uncertain territory for me, but certainly some online sources would put the accurate range of a medieval musket as around 100 metres. So therefore, if Sober Island was undefended, any would-be attacker of Stornoway could sail straight up and land his men on the south side of the inner harbour with relative safety and create a beachhead for themselves with which to base an attack. So you can see here in this photo, it's not that big, but you can see you can see my cursor there. So you can see the castle on the little skerry there. This might not have mattered so much in a provincial location, but Stornoway is somewhere where many people have fought over. It would seem unlikely that either McNichol or MacLeod, for example, could leave Sober Island completely undefended for an enemy to land upon when just across on the opposite side of the harbour they've gone to the effort of building a castle. The same would presumably have been true back in the times of the Lord of the Isles, or even further back with Norse invaders, or forward in time to the Fife adventurers and Cromwell, who we now know had a substantial fort under the Port Authority offices in Amity House. So it was reasoned that the long grass and ring pools of Sober Island might be hiding post-medieval, medieval, or even earlier fortifications. Secondly, although not unrelatedly, the site provides a good harbour anchorage and hole out in peacetime. This can be seen in the way it was used in a boat yard in the 18th century. So that one's 1882, and you can see that there's boats getting fixed just on the Sober Island there. And this one's 1798. Now, the Sober Island's actually over there, just under the castle, sort of on the left of the picture. And you can see, if you look closely, there's loads of boats getting fixed or holed up. So, and the north side of the island in particular has a bay filled with silts, which would preserve artefacts. So, on top of that, on the east side of the island, we discovered this massive iron ring fixed into the rock. Then there's another on the north side of the island. Both of these are unknown date, but thought to be maritime in function. So that's another thing I'd like to ask the audience about, if anyone's got any ideas about what the function of this big, massive iron ring could be. But so we thought that Sober Island and its immediate vicinity might be hiding a wealth of maritime detritus from Stornoway's long history and connection with fishing, sailing, and the sea. Okay, our third reason. Thirdly, there's another locus of activity nearby known as Croaghnacloich, or Gallows Hill, which is directly above Erdeclerc. This hill may have been the site of hangings in medieval and post-medieval times, although no definite cases are recorded. This is potentially relevant, as people who were brought there to be hung may well have come by boat and moored at Erdeclerc. The name Erdeclerc, or promontory of the cleric or clergyman, may then be related to the last rites of the condemned. So such an activity, if repeated enough times, may have garnered the place name and left some trace. Fourthly, Gallows Hill is also the location of a significant Neolithic monument, a scheduled ancient monument, thought to be a chambered tomb and provided with the highest level of protection in the country. So that's, you can just see that's the chamber of what was a massive cairn, and that would be the chamber in the middle of it. Back in the Neolithic, or so we thought. The remains of the chamber can still be seen near the gallows cairn, surrounded by a circle of low stones. Again, the proximity to such a monument led us to speculate that the dead may have been transported to the tomb via a landing at Erdeclerc or Sober Island. A find previously thought to be a a flint scraper is stored in the museum in Yellin and recorded as coming from this vicinity. So this is an interpretive painting of what the cairn might have looked like, which was commissioned by Carol Knott, sitting over there, and it's very nice. It's very big as well, but there's some. Yeah, okay, I'll not get sidetracked here. So you can see that. So shortly before the excavation, another possible reason why Sober Island might be interesting was I had made an intriguing discovery while looking over old maps of Stornoway on the National Library of Scotland website. One of the earliest dates from 1785, and right on its edge lies Gallows Hill. Now this estate plan was unfortunately damaged by water and had to be conserved, but the conservation had not managed to repair the very edge of the plan. Can you see it there? So you can see the Gallows Hill on the left-hand side, and then just to the left of that, there looks what looks to be a circle of stones. Can you see that? Make that out, and then there's a row of dashes, a row of stones heading to the north. And just beneath that, you can see most of an annotative phrase, something LE of stones. So, given that there was a circle of stones marked above it, you would think that it could be pile of stones, but you'd think it was circle of stones. So you've got a circle of stone, a stone circle with a row going off it. So the circle of stones may have originally been incorporated into the cairn material, as in the last slide. If you can look, see there's sort of standing stones around the edge. However, they were certainly gone by 1785. I asked Chris Fleet of the National Library about the accuracy of this plan when he came to give a talk here last November. He answered that we can trust its accuracy as much as we can trust any map, including OS maps, as it was produced by a professional surveyor for a wealthy client who could actually go and check. So it's as accurate as you can get. So therefore it would look very much like there was a monument upon Gallows Hill that was not simply a chambered tomb, but incorporated a row of standing stones, much like the main Callanish monument. So this is quite a startling discovery and makes the monument seem a lot more important than previously thought. So, for all of the above reasons, we thought that there would be a chance of finding something at Sober Island. Also, and equally as important, it was a location which was easily accessible, which did not present difficult health and safety problems, and which had no known protected archaeology which might stop us being able to carry out a dig. We could surmise that it was considered a place that we could easily organise a dig which had high archaeological potential but low current value. So we had found a location to create what we wanted, which was a sustainable long-term dig close to Stornoway, which would offer the opportunity for local people of all walks and ages to excavate their own past. But we only had enough money for 1 year, and 1 year on a shoestring at that. So we were reliant upon finding something in order to create the right conditions for us to apply for a decent amount of money to continue in the future. Luckily, we did find something, and we have found enough to know that we have great potential at this site and could even have many interesting years of digging to come. However, I hope you don't mind, but before we get to the results of the excavation, I would like to try something out. My thought is that I have in front of me the great and good of Stornoway, people who have got a particular interest in history of Stornoway and are particularly knowledgeable about Stornoway. So I would like to ask you all a question, and we're going to have to do a wee show of hands eventually, but I'd like to ask you all, why is it called Sober Island? In the course of the excavation, I asked this question to as many people as possible and noted the answers. I made a list of these possible reasons, which I'd like to share with you, and if possible, find out how many of you think that each one of these is the right one. And if there's anyone with any other reasons why it's called Sober Island that I haven't got on this list, I'd like you to tell me that as well. We'll go back to the last one. We'll start with this. So on the first edition map of 1849, it's the top one, Erda Clerich. On the 1785 plan, which had the Callanist monument on Gallows Hill, it's Erd Ehrlich. I don't know if that's correct Gaelic but pronunciation, but something like Erd Ehrlich, which presumably means something completely different. If anyone can tell me what that might mean, please do interject. But we're hoping to enlist a professional to look at all the names in due course. But your collective opinion, as I was saying, might be just as valuable. The OS name book, which lists the original sources of place names gathered by the OS, describes the place as on the west side of Stornoway Harbour, 14 chains southwest of the town, a small promontory of arable land, on which is a trig point named Clark's Point. The first edition map also marks the trig point on the island, so that corroborates the suggestion that Clark is here the same as Clerich, and that this seems to have either replaced Arderlich or Arderlich was a mistake. We don't know. But anyway, by the time of the first edition and the OS name book, it's definitely Clerich or Clark, cleric of the church. So why this should be is up for debate as well. As mentioned previously, it could refer to the gallows immediately above the headland and the last rites of the condemned. This would seem plausible, but on the other hand, there's no actual record of anyone being hung on Gallows Hill. And also one source that I've read suggests that the gallows name might actually have been derived from a type of maritime signal, a signal post which was stationed upon the Gallows Hill, which took the same shape as the gallows. So, no one might have been hung there. So anyway, a separate suggestion was that it may have been the site of an open-air sermon after the disruption in 1843. So being within eyesight of the laird's abode, this would be quite a bold location for a sermon, and perhaps meant that the name was coined quickly. However, there's no records of this happening, and I checked, John Dickey checked with an authority on the subject, Norman Campbell from BBC Alba, and he'd never heard of this happening, so that one's not very likely. Another suggestion was in Barra, fishing boats are blessed every year in the blessing of the boats as they leave the harbour by a clerk of the church, or a cleric of the church possibly. So this is perhaps a similar thing going on in Stornoway, although I do know that if it was priest, if it was a Catholic priest or pre-disruption or Reformation, it would be a sagart, wouldn't it? The priest, the Gaelic for priest is sagart, so maybe it wouldn't be cleric. So that's another suggestion. All these suggestions are, I think it's worthwhile to go through them and to think about them, but a further suggestion made by a member of the public was that there was often cormorants congregating on the rocks around the island, and when they sat drying their wings, they looked slightly reminiscent of a clergyman in a black robe. These are all things that people have said to me, so I didn't make them up. Again, there's no evidence for any of these suggestions other than them being extant in the community. So without any further evidence, there's no way of knowing which is right, other than perhaps getting a room full of people that know the history of Stornoway and asking them. So, and this is also the case with the nickname Sober Island. We've got so many suggestions of why this should be. So this is. Can you read that? Is it? So number one, people, particularly young people, used to congregate here to socialise and possibly drink too much. This was indeed the case in the 1980s, when there was even a wooden shed erected as a drinking den. Number two, so wait a minute, I'll go through them all, and then if we go back and then ask how many people think that that's the right one. Is that okay? Yeah, that first one, it's well attested, but I've also spoke to lots of people that said that they reckon the name is a lot older than that. So that would kind of discount it. But number two, folk used to hide booze on the island on a Saturday night and then reconvene on Sunday to drink and socialise when the pubs were all shut. There was also quite a lot of people told me that. Three, I quite like this one, drunks from the town were thrown out of pubs and told to walk to Sober Island and back to sober up.
probably true.
It's quite a good distance for it, isn't it? You know, by the time you got back, you know, I don't know. So that's a good one. 4, because it was associated with the clergy, Air de Clerich, so it was sober. Which is possible, but we're still left with why was it associated with the clergy? But
Because they got drunk too.
5 drunken sailors who, this is I was told this by somebody, I should have got names of everyone that suggested them, but anyway, 5 drunken sailors who turned up for work inebriated were chucked off their boats here. I thought that was quite unlikely, because if they were drunk and they got chucked off, they'd probably drown, wouldn't they? 6 drunk Faroese sailors crashed into it whilst trying to enter the harbour.
Possibly.
But I have heard of Faroese sailors being rather drunk. But
I've seen a French ship coming in, trying to cut through the causeway.
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
It got stranded on
The shingle.
No, it got stranded on Skivord.
Right. Right.
I was working at Fleming's at the time.
Oh, well, maybe it should be French sailors. Drunk French sailors crashed into it.
They were thinking it was, well, the island was an island, Ilan Goat.
Aye.
So,
The Goat Island, or
well, not
oh,
Goat,
Goth.
the island of Help, Core.
Ah.
And when they made the causeway after the Second World War, it was to give the town a boost.
Yeah.
That's what they put a shipyard there, and a slipway.
Yeah.
Now, I had occasion to work for Fleming's for quite a few years, on and off. And I remember hearing even from my father, he used to keep his boat there, that Ilan Nupor is what it should be, the island probably of help, but help the ships coming in.
All right. Okay.
It was like a
We've got a different idea about the same thing there, but
zinc core there.
yeah. Well, this was
Never a coat on it, put it that way.
no. It was Ken and John Booley that. But well, anyway, it was 8. There was a suggestion of some sort of leper colony, or 7. I've also foreign sailors were quarantined here. Both 7 and 8 require some sort of. I'd have thought require some sort of wall or containment around it. Sorry?
Cromwell used it as part of his fort.
Aye, yeah. That's Go Island. Yeah. So number 9 was that it was suggested that there's a Gaelic word cover which rhymes with sober, but means sea spray. I don't know what you think about this. So this was John Booley, I think, and Ken that suggested this. So of the strength of the wind when deciding to leave the port. So this may have been a reason. If the sea spray was seen coming over the rock, then it was too wild to go out. And the idea is that cover became anglicised into sober. A parallel suggestion is that Goat Island at the entrance to the harbour may have been an anglicisation of Go or Wind Island. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that does sound like it could be true, doesn't it? So. Yeah, can we try a show of hands? Who thinks that number 1 is the correct reason? Anyone? No. Number 2? No.
I can say 1 actually.
You're going to say 1, right? Okay, 1. Number 2? No. Number 3? Anyone? No. Any takers for number 4? Because it was associated with the clergy? No. Number 5? Oh, this is quite. This is good. 6? Oh, 5. Is that a hand for 5?
Yeah,
all right.
There's 2 up. There's 3.
Three.
2 up there and 1 over there.
All right. So 3 for drunken sailors. 6 Faroese sailors are kind of the same one, isn't it? 7 sailors arriving on foreign shores quarantined here before allowed into the town. Nope. 8 was the leper colony, kind of related. No takers. And 9 is the cover sober. Right. Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Right. That's, well, thanks very much. Can I
offer one that?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Several members of the Stornoway Town Council, I lived in Point Street across from the town hall, and they were were discussing it in the early 60s, and they said that in the late 1880s, 1890s, there were so many boats in Stornoway Harbour. You know, when herring was relit, that the boats went all the way across the harbour to Sober Island,
right?
And that when they came out of the pubs, some of them went so far that they just ended up on Sober Island. But that's another.
Okay, that's another one.
That was more than possible, Malcolm.
It is.
Even when we were growing
the
up,
boats did go right across. The harbour.
Even as far over to
What?
McDonald's.
Not quite.
Oh, yes.
Gardeners were right across there.
Why would that make it sober, though? I'm not sure I understand that.
Well,
But
they had come out of the pubs
they come
on
out.
Saturday night.
So it's ironic.
Because they
Aye.
came in. They did. Sunday was sacrosanct back
Oh,
then,
well, absolutely.
and they came in, dropped their catch, and went into the pubs. And
Right.
They came back out.
Yeah, right.
Went
Okay.
onto the boats
So,
and reached across to Sober Island.
well, we better have a vote on that. How many folk think that Malcolm's?
I don't suppose anybody.
Oh, well, there's one anyway.
It's worth a go, Malcolm.
Two. Okay.
The old town councils back then didn't know much either. Hasn't changed these days.
No. It's worth to be, I tell you.
Okay, right now we better get back to the results of the actual dig. So as we were saying, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have money to pay for a full post-excavation analysis. So this year's excavations were conceived of as a limited exploratory evaluation. No archaeological features were to be fully excavated. If we found archaeological features, we undertook only to clean them up and find their extents and maybe take a little bit of them to try and characterise what they were, whilst leaving plenty of it. Plenty of archaeology for the future years, for radiocarbon dates, environmental studies and other things. So we were just really tickling the surface. There was two main phases of work, survey and then the excavation. The survey, the first stage of the survey was a topographic survey, mapping the area in detail. And we had this carried out by McKeever Consultancies, the local civil engineers. We tried to involve as many local companies and organisations as possible. So here you can see the topographic survey, which gives the heights and locations of all the trenches. Can you see my cursor? The eye bolt, the big eye bolt that I was talking about is just. Can you see the annotation there? Yeah. Anyway, and then after the topographic survey, we did a metal detector survey of the entire headland, in the hope that this might help direct our excavations to areas of interesting activity. So there you can see some ring pools and then some change. So the metal detector entailed detecting in lines, straight lines crossing the entire site at 2 metre intervals, placing red flags where we had a hit. A second sweep would often be undertaken after the first. Each hit was returned to with a camera, a notepad and a helper, and a small box was excavated in order to locate the metal, paying attention to any variation in deposits encountered. This is very important because the mistake many metal detectors make is removing a piece of metal from the soil without taking note of the layer which it was deposited in. The layer, or context as we call it in archaeology, can tell you so much about the find that extracting it without this information is tantamount to vandalism. As an aside, I was very upset to note that a metal detectorist had been digging up a broch called Dunborinish at Uig Sands a few weekends ago. There was holes all over it. Iron artefacts, if they were discovered in a context like that, would probably be unrecognisable lumps of rust. So, you know, someone might take them out and not be able to do anything with them, but with expensive conservation they can be saved. But of course no individual could do this, so they'd be lost to us all. And of course if anyone was lucky enough to to find gold or silver, which doesn't rust, would they actually give it to the museum? So put simply, it just isn't right for folk to be metal detecting on actual monuments around the islands, unless it's part of a bigger project which is investigating the site. So anyway, so that's a bit of a digression. But we carried out our metal detecting to the above methodology over the entire area, but unfortunately no metal finds of age were found. However, we did find a typology of ring pools from around 1980 onwards, and £2.56 in coins. Memorably, a passing member of the public, whose a name I should have got as well, but she recounted a story of how her husband used to hide change around the island for her kids to find with metal detectors. So it meant that £2.56 was probably theirs. But at least we demonstrated the benefits of using a systematic methodology, because we found them. Here we go. So trench 1 was at the very top of the island. It's located over the highest point of the island, where a roughly rectangular depression could be made out, which we thought might have been the remains of a structure, possibly even a fortification. At Dunaston and Ness, there was a tower castle right on the top of the island, so we wondered whether it could be similar. But after the trench was laid out, what was immediately noticeable and somewhat unusual for a coastal location was that there was very little or no topsoil. The turf was going straight out of peat, a deep layer of peat. The peat seemed to be a homogeneous layer, although it was noted it was darker at the bottom, towards the base. A rectangular slate, possibly a roofing slate, was discovered in the upper levels of this peat. The peat was cleaned off as if it was topsoil, and revealing a grey, silty grit, which just directly overlay the bedrock. The two large stones were under the peat, but over the silty grit. Sorry, I'm getting a bit archaeology there. So basically, it wasn't a tower castle. But during the clean back of this peat, lithics started to appear. Lithics is pieces of flint of quartz which have been struck and changed by human hand in the process of making stone tools. So we started finding lithics in this peat. The first was a flint pebble which had been split. Here we go, the flint pebble, that top left, just there, that's what it looks like. These are technical drawings. So this was identified as a bipolar core by the lithic specialist, i.e. a piece of flint which had been used to make a stone tool. This is highly significant because there's no naturally occurring flint in the bedrock of Lewis or the Hebrides. Very rarely we get it washed up on the west side, originating from deposits made in the last ice age. This means that if flint is found, it's highly likely to be from those periods of time when stone was the main resource for tool making, i.e. the Stone Ages, and most likely the Neolithic, although stone tools were used in the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, but to a lesser degree. So this find was quickly followed by a series of quartz flakes, which were also the result of tool making, and another flint bipolar core. There was no evidence of a structure. It was clear that the two large stones were perpendicular with two parallel ridges in the bedrock, so together they made a false impression. So that was our first trench. I'm going to take you through our trenches. So Trench 2 was laid out over a subcircular depression surrounded by a donut-shaped low wall, which looked to be a structure of some sort. This time the peaty topsoil was full of bits of slate, but cleaned off onto an archaeological layer, which again contained stone tools, including a lovely fine-grained sandstone blade. There you go. That's like a blade as in a knife. And this time also lots of unglazed ancient pottery. Here we go. The pot this is a pot which has been smashed in situ. We sent the pot to an expert who thought it was medieval or late Iron Age in date. So, 1600 AD or earlier, based on what it looked like. Hopefully we will have carbon dates when we carry it on next year. And then, in the same trench, we found a beautiful broken quartz arrowhead. So that was our first arrowhead. We did not excavate any further in this trench. It was clear we have an important structure, which is at least medieval in date, probably older, and because that pot was on top of everything else, so the structure that's in that trench is older than that pot. So trench 3 was located at the foot of the steep slope, just as you're coming onto the main island, the headland proper from the shingle tombola. It was positioned over the desire line, or the place where you would naturally want to walk in order to look for evidence of a fortified entrance, or alternatively for stray finds which may have accumulated over the years. This trench was filled entirely with beach shingle. The problem with shingle and sand is that it moves with the tides and swells, meaning that there are no proper layers or context within it. Stuff from deep under the shingle can be moved onto the surface with a big swell and a high tide, and vice versa. Therefore, the finds from the trench were what we call unstratified. However, they have originated from the general area and are still interesting nonetheless. We found many 18th century clay tobacco pipes, a small blue glass bead, which is yet to be properly dated, and again 5 flint flakes and another bipolar flint core. This would have been plenty enough to find, but as wont to happen in archaeological digs, on the very last day we discovered something entirely unexpected at the bottom of the shingle. This is a substantial dry stone curving wall, very probably a section of a prehistoric house. Inside of it there was floor deposits intact, and also an old ground surface on the outside. So we've just got like a little quarter of it looks very sort of perfectly circular, but you never know what the rest of it's like. But it's really substantially made, so that's a really exciting find. It was also far too much evidence to deal with on the last day of a dig that started with a tight budget. So we had to cover it all up, and hopefully we'll get a chance to investigate it next year, or in the coming years. Okay, trench 4 was located over another subcircular feature which we thought might be a structure. It was on the seaward side of the headland, near the massive iron ring that was set into the shore cliff. Yeah, we thought it was a structure, but as you can see in that photo there, it's just a bedrock sticking out in a roughly circular shape. And that's the iron ring that's just right close to that trench. So again, the grass turf was growing directly out of a deep brown peat. By this time we're becoming aware that the dark peat at the base of the brown peat was actually a separate archaeological deposit, so we took great care to clean down onto it. However, just cleaning onto the top of it, volunteers found 2 flint flakes and another flint bipolar core. We then excavated a section of the dark peat and found a further 2 flint flakes and yet another flint bipolar core and 2 flakes of quartz, one of which exhibited circular impact scars on its surface. Now, these scars are thought to be the result of using antler hammers to quarry the quartz from suitable natural veins. So in the Stone Ages, in Lewis, because we didn't have any naturally occurring flint, quartz was the main stone that was used to make arrowheads and blades and basically everything. Now, there's quartz veins all over the islands, but they're all of varying quality for geological reasons, basically. But so some veins of quartz are really fractured, and they just break up into lots of wee bits. Other veins of quartz, it's really homogeneous, and it's like there's no cracks in it, so it's perfect for making tools. So this one here is at Guynahain. The Fank, just as you're going on take the Uig road, it's just about half a mile down, next to Callanish 5, and there's a Fank. And if you look in at that little cliff, it's entirely quartz, and it's this beautiful, solid, milky quartz. Now, can you see in this photo that's just come up? Can you see the little round, tiny little round marks? These are marks that were made by an antler hammer, which was the way that they used to quarry the quartz out of the vein, and it was the first team of the antler turned upside down, so it made a very particular, very small circular point of impact, and then it's a very sort of concentrated blow, and this was apparently the way that it was used. But so this quartz quarry here is pretty much the only one in the whole of the UK that's known about, and it was a guy, Torben Bjarke Ballin, if you want to look it up, who wrote about it. So what we found was a little tiny bit of quartz, and it's really hard to get to photo it, but can you see there's like two little circular marks. It's quite hard to see on my cursor. I can't see, for some reason you can't see my cursor anymore. And there's this little piece of quartz that was found on Sober Island has the same marks as the quarry at Garnaheim. So it's very rare, and it's quite interesting because it shows that people have gone to a good vein of quartz, quarried it, taken suitable bits of quartz with them, and then gone somewhere else and sat making tools. Trench 5. Trench 5 was located over the lowest level, the central part of the island, with the logic that deposits might have rolled down and built up in the middle. So it might have given us, I thought it might give us a cross-section of the use of the island. It was only 3 by 4 meters. Instead of finding that, however, we met the same deep peat as in all the other trenches, with a dark layer of peat at the bottom. We excavated a tiny, like 1 by 2 meter section of the dark peat. In doing so, we found a quartz split pebble core, 2 flint flakes, and then this beautiful, what's called a leaf-shaped arrowhead. So that arrowhead is about the same size as that leaf. It's tiny, and it's just the most amazingly, exquisitely made object. I mean, the skill that's gone into making it is incredible. And they're a very specific type of arrowhead that was in style in the early Neolithic. So it's between 4000 BC and 3500 BC, which is older than Callanish. Callanish was commenced at around 2900. So this is, 600 years older at least than Callanish. And I picked up that leaf. The actual leaf is just from the road right next to Sober Island, so it's quite quite prosaic. So that was it. So Trench 6. Trench 6 was located over a little headland that protruded from the main island towards the Minch, i.e. closest to any potential attacker. So, and it looked like it might have had a wall running around the edge. It was a tiny trench. It was just 2 by 2 meters. Again, you can see, if you look closely, you can see in that photo that the grass is just growing out a deep layer of peat. And again, the peat was dark, really dark at the bottom. As we were looking for the fortifications, we removed all of the peat to see what was underneath. There was no fortifications at all. But yet again, in removing the dark layer of peat, we found 5 quartz flakes, 3 flint flakes, a flint scraper tool, and all in 2 by 2 meters. So the Sober Island is just loaded with these stone tools and the waste from making stone tools. So that finally, our final trench was Trench 7. It was located over some massive timbers that were on the shingle spit. And this was our last hope for the fortification theory. We thought that maybe these might have been something to do with a massive wall that went around the island to pen in drunken sailors or people with leprosy. But again, no, sorry. It seemed the wood, because that's it. The wood in it seemed straighter and bigger than the other bits. So we thought it was maybe some sort of fortification.
Could you make out what wood it was?
Aye, well, luckily John Booley McLennan happened to be walking by at the time, so he thought it was the remains of a tabernacle from a Zulu boat. The tabernacle is the bit where the mast comes in and joins to the main boat. So there's all this massive structure to keep it, to you know, a strong strength sort of thing. So yeah, that's what we reckon it is, or that's what John Bully thinks it is. So that's good enough for me. Aye. Tabernacle, a metal or wooden structure in the shape of an open box which locates and supports a deck-stepped mast. A bolt passing through the tabernacle and mast can provide a pivot point for lowering the stick. You can see lots of big, thick iron stakes in the photo there. Although the tabernacle supports the downward thrust of the mast, it should not suffer any of the wrenching or side loads which are taken by shrouds and stays. So that's what a tabernacle is. But
Usually made of strong timber anyway.
Aye.
From probably oak.
Yeah. I'm not sure what timber that was. Angus Smith also came and had a look at there's loads of other timbers on the north side there in the mud, and he thought they were all Zulu boats, you know. So called apparently because they were in operation at the time of the Zulu Wars. Nothing to do with actual Zulus. Anyway, so to conclude, what we found from our 7 trenches so far is we could surmise that number one, we found absolutely no evidence of fortification, which was the proposed presence of which was the main impetus for digging here. But B, we found abundant evidence of Neolithic stone tool manufacture, which no one expected. And C, we found two ancient structures of as yet unknown date and function, but very interesting. So the result's quite clear on that count, but we're also left with, there is 2 lingering questions. The iron ring, the massive iron ring, still hasn't properly been explained. And also the abundance of slates. I don't know if anyone might have any ideas about this. We wondered whether perhaps the slate was ballast from the ship that got chucked off there, or if slate was imported to the island in big chunks and maybe someone sat and made smaller tiles of it. Because all of the slate that we found, it was all kind of small bits, and none of it had a nail hole. So, you know, none of it looked like an actual roof tile. It was all like waste from making roof tiles, if you weren't, you know, or that would make more sense. So if anyone's got any ideas or comes across any ideas, please answer us on a postcard, because that's interesting. Just as an aside, if there was ballast from ships getting onto Sober Island, that could, it's a worry that, maybe all this flint and flint tools came from ballast from somewhere else. But we can discount that because all of that flint was stratified in the bottom layer of the peat. So it was definitely there from the Neolithic kind of thing. It's fascinating to me that we have the exact same deposits all over the island, the deep peat with the dark peat at its base, containing multitudes of stone tools and the waste from the making of stone tools. It would seem to me that what we have is in fact like an ancient ground surface which witnessed the creation of stone tools many times, and the waste flakes were deposited throughout the soil. Subsequently, the climate has changed, and the growth of peat on top of it has preserved this old ground surface, a bit like a time capsule from the Neolithic. Which I like because it gives quite a vivid picture of early humans sitting upon Sober Island, making tools from flint and quartz, which they had brought to the place. This was a hangout, somewhere people gathered and lingered. Maybe they even brought some nettle beer. Gets a bit bigger potentially, because it is now known that farming spread here via people travelling by sea from northwest France around 4000 BC or slightly earlier. And we also know that throughout the Neolithic period there's a lot of the communication and travelling between places like Orkney and the Boyne Valley in Ireland, passing obviously Lewis. There's a pottery style called grooveware which has been found at both of these places and at Callanish. And the current thinking is that people probably did actually bring the pots with them rather than just trade them. So people were actually travelling these distances. So that's, we must imagine people kayaking past Stornoway on their way north or south. And they probably would be on the Minch side because the west side is still an ocean with ocean swells, you know, so if you're in a small boat, you'd be far safer on the Minch side. I spoke to, there's an author, David Gans, that came here last summer that kayaked from Shetland to Cornwall, and he agreed. He was basically saying the same thing. But anyway, so if you imagine people kayaking all this distance, their directions are oral tradition, aren't they? The directions are oral, nothing's written down. So, you know, what could be more obvious than point if you're trying to describe, you know, something to people that had never seen it before. And if we could imagine a prominent monument upon Gallows Hill, which was visible from the sea, the evidence of Sober Island becomes even more interesting, because it could be that Gallows Hill provided something like a signpost for travellers who wished to go to the main Callanish monument. So could it be that Sober Island witnessed Irish and Orcadian travellers hauling their boats up and continuing on to the main Callanish monument on foot from there? So how did they navigate back then? Well, the North Star has always been the main navigation tool, and it's always due north, enabling people to travel north or south, or indeed east or west. And as you'll see on the slide, which I gave you a little too early, Gallows Hill is actually completely, like, almost exactly due east of Callanish. So if you did wish to tell a traveller who was kayaking up the east side of Lewis how to get to Callanish, you could say, paddle until you see a standing stone circle on top of a hill, and then go due west, and you would get there. However, there might be another way to approach the Callanish complex from here, because as has long been noted, there's numerous stone circles around Callanish, and various ideas have been put forward why this should be. But one of the most recent ideas was put forward by US-based archaeologist Dr. Rebecca Rennell, and afterwards taken up by Professor Colin Richards, both of the UHI. Put simply, it suggests that some of the circles were built purely to be seen and overlook an east-west route across the island. They may even create a specific route to the main Callanish monument or central group of the monuments, marked by highly visible stone circles, directing the way and ordering the landscape on the way to the central holy place sort of thing. So in the latest large synthesis of archaeological understanding of sites like Callanish, entitled Building the Great Stone Circles of the North, Colin Richards suggests that this route would take a traveller from the stone circle at Halfway Garage, there's a flattened stone circle at Halfway Garage, west past Achmore Stone Circle, and from there to the main monument. He suggested this, but he doesn't know or suggest where the route might start. Priest Glen, possibly, but Gallows Hill is, you can see Gallows Hill from the sea, so.
Well, the thing is, you're supposed to see one circle from the other.
Aye, yeah, that's it. I went up, obviously thinking about this, I went up Gallows Hill and looked to see if you could see Halfway Garage, but there's too many trees. So I went to Halfway Garage and looked back, and there you can see if you follow the line of telegraph poles, that's Gallows Hill, quite obviously the trees right in the middle of the shot on this floor here. So it's almost framed by two low hills. It's like boom.
Where did you take that from?
That's from Halfway Garage, the flattened stone circle.
Come to my peak, just about a mile away from there, you would have found an old stone circle there too.
Oh really?
It's tiny.
Oh.
The stones are tiny, but the circle is quite big.
Oh, I'll be very interested to see it.
We'll take you there anytime.
Aye, oh great, aye. Because that's the next point is if you turn around from Halfway Garage and try to look at Achmore, I don't think it's a bit more difficult because Achmore is flattened as well. So, but I don't think you can quite see Achmore. So if this whole theory is right, there should be another stone circle somewhere in between Halfway Garage and Achmore.
Yeah, there is.
Right?
Small stones, but you can see.
Well, I'd love to see it, man. Aye, yeah.
Take you there anytime.
Okay.
Tomorrow if you want.
Ah well, could well do. Do you mind if I take my 1-year-old son? So, yeah, it's entirely possible. And just I was going to just excuse the lack of photos, but I just wanted to say, yeah, these ideas are just offered as food for thought, because none of this is proven, this last bit. But what is for certain is we have a very interesting site which really deserves more investigation. We found a lot more than we were looking for. Sober Island was quietly keeping some ancient secrets under the guise of being a teenage delinquent. And I'm sure I can speak for Austin and all the other volunteers when I say that we really hope we get the chance to carry on investigating this fascinating site for in the coming years. So
Maybe that's where they got the song The Drunken Sailor.
we still haven't found what we're looking for. So thank you very much. That's all I've got.
Oh, well, I think we've had other questions. I'd like to thank you all for coming along. Our next meeting, our next winter series of lectures will actually take place on Tuesday the 14th of March. That's to accommodate the speaker who's coming from the mainland. And I've totally forgotten her name.
Alison Sheridan, is it?
It is, yeah.
Mm. Alison Sheridan. She's head of, she used to be.
And our AGM is actually going to be online at the end of March, rather than, because we can't move it forward because we won't have the accounts ready in time. And, hopefully they'll be boosted tonight when people go out the door and might remember Mr. Smith. Thank you all for coming along and contributing, and I hope you enjoyed Ian's talk. I certainly did.
No. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much.